name's Marianne Bulger, and I'm the head of people and platform at Golden Ventures. I'm here to be your host tonight, introducing the speakers and the panelists. So first things first, if you want to comment or follow along on social, feel free to use this hashtag. First thing I want to do is introduce our hosts. We, as a team, came together to put on this event because we really wanted to bring the community together around something that we think is really important, around a topic that isn't necessarily discussed in a forum like this. And so first, we've got Golden Ventures, which is a leading seed stage venture capital fund based in Toronto and investing across North America. In the past 8 years, we've grown from a mobile-first fund to a top-tier sector-agnostic fund in North America, investing in the likes of Skip the Dishes, Ritual, Wattpad, Hush, Brightwheel, Skywatch, Roadmonk, a few of those local names. Lightspeed Venture Partners is a VC firm focused on accelerating disruptive innovations and trends in the enterprise and consumer sectors. Over the past 2 decades, the Lightspeed team has backed hundreds of entrepreneurs and helped build more than 300 companies globally, including Snap, The Honest Company, Grubhub, Nest, Nutanix, AppDynamics, and MuleSoft. And lastly, Faire. Faire is a wholesale marketplace that empowers retailers to discover and try thousands of items risk-free while helping makers grow and streamline their sales, ordering, and inventory management, making it easier than ever to get their goods showcased in top boutiques across the United States. Faire is also one of the youngest companies in the YC list of top companies in 2018. So tonight, the purpose of the event, it's all about leveling up. It's all about taking your team from point A to B to C, and then to limits that perhaps you never even thought were possible. And particularly, we're focusing on Kitchener-Waterloo and what it really takes to do so in this environment. As you already know, there's 3 different types of name tags. We do this to make it easy for you to find the people that you came here to meet. While this might be seemingly the main event, for me, the main event isn't always the main event. I know you've come here to meet each other, and so afterwards, make sure to look for those that you might be here to find. So first things first, I apologize for the pixelated logo. I'd like to call Curtis McBride up to share a little bit more about the space here that he's created.
Thanks. This has been a cool walk through the history of my life tonight. Little known fact, I've known Marianne since we were both 6 months old, running around on the beach at our family, or each of our joint family cottages. Ameet, I went to high school with. I don't know where Ameet is. Right in front of me. And then I saw Alan Pollan, who I also went to high school with, and people I used to work with, Thomas Benda. So this was a cool little adventure of the last 38 years of my life. So the space you're sitting in, how many people have been in this building before? How many people have heard me give this speech before? All right. You have to promise to laugh to the jokes. So the way I usually tell this story is we were based in South Kitchener. I run a company called Vision in the building, and we're based down in South Kitchener. When we moved down there, Blackberry was at the peak of its growth. Rent was 3 times as expensive in Waterloo as it was in Kitchener. So we decided, okay, let's go down there. And then around the time that we were trying to move back, the downtown core of Kitchener is ramping. This is the epicenter of tech in town. And I always tell the story that I made the mistake of asking my team, we're moving, where do you guys want to go? And I gave them this big list of things they could pick from, and they just picked the best thing of all. Do you want parking or not? Yes. Bike trails or not? Yes. Do you want to keep our manufacturing together with their sales and engineering? Yes. And so what came back was a building that didn't exist. We wanted parking in the downtown core, close to bike trails, food right in the building, and keep our manufacturing close with our engineering and sales. And so I went back to the company and said, sorry, this building doesn't exist. And we have this expression at Vision, the complacency is not an option. And I say it to the team all the time, so they rightfully turned it back around and said, I thought complacency was not an option, boss, go figure it out. So we started just literally going to Google Maps, and we found a big white roof. If you ever want to have fun on a Saturday, go to Google Maps, zoom out to Kitchener, look for the big white roof. You'll find this building. It's 475,000 square feet, which is about the size of 5 Walmarts, so 12 acres under one roof. We have 1,100 parking spaces. And when I brought this to the team, they're like, yeah, this is great, but we don't need 475,000 square feet. So the only way that we could figure out how to move ourselves in here was to, I've literally never developed a basement before I took this project on. The only thing I knew how to do was to be a product manager, so I said, well, why don't we just say something's true, and then we'll figure out how to make it true, which apparently in real estate is not a thing you do. But we basically said this was the world's largest IoT-focused maker campus. So you're a hardware company, you need a bunch of things, you want to accelerate time to market, you need access to venture capital, you want RF design, industrial design, IP law, marketing agencies, you need beer, you need coffee, you need circuit boards. So we set out to kind of build a brand, raise some money, and then had to go and actually do it. So fast forward 2 years later, you have beer, circuit boards, and venture capital, everything a startup needs, and we've been filling it up ever since. So this space you're in, we give it away for free. If anyone knows of like a not-for-profit or an event like this you want to run, we do 2 or 3 a week in here now. Literally the entire marketing of it it's free, mostly free. And welcome to the building. Hope you guys enjoy the day.
Thanks, Curtis. So this event wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. Really big thanks to RBC for stepping up and making this possible. The second sponsor is Prospect. It's a brand and a platform that we actually recently launched via Golden Ventures. It is the definitive career hub in the Canadian tech industry. It's a full job board aggregator, and so it hosts almost 400 companies from coast to coast, including your career pages, and you don't need to post a single thing, and it's free. And so if you have any questions about it, please come and ask me afterwards. You can find it at prospect.fyi. So first, we're going to do a panel. I'm going to introduce the panelists, so excuse me for reading, because I chose not to memorize their bios. First, I want to invite up Joel Cumming. Joel is Skywatch's Chief Technology Officer. His team focuses on making Earth observation data open and accessible for everyone. Previously, Joel was head of data at Kick Interactive, and prior to that, he managed analytics and big data teams at BlackBerry, helping the company grow from 3 million to 80 million subscribers. Dinah Davis is the VP of R&D at Arctic Wolf Networks. She has over 17 years of experience in the tech industry, with time spent at Communications Security Establishment Canada, BlackBerry, TrustWave, and Desire to Learn. Dinah is also the founder of Code Like a Girl, a publication whose goal it is to change society's perceptions of how women are viewed in technology. And lastly, we have Stephen Woods, a senior engineering director for Google in Kitchener-Waterloo, Canada. Since 2008, Stephen has applied his entrepreneurial talents to building Google's engineering and product efforts and leadership in Kitchener-Waterloo across a wide array of consumer and business products. A serial entrepreneur before Google, Stephen built companies in software services and infrastructure, in gaming, in-game advertising, and consumer services, including Quack.com, the world's first interactive voice assistant, which was sold to America Online Time Warner in 2000. And I lied, there's one more important person who's our moderator. Ameet Shah is a partner at Golden Ventures. As an investor, Ameet has worked with a number of successful startups, including Brightwheel, Chef Hero, Hush, Inkbox, Skywatch, Roadmonk. Prior to joining Golden, Ameet spent some years living in the Bay Area before returning back to Toronto in 2005 to co-found Five Mobile, a premier product design and development firm that was later acquired by Zynga, where he served as the GM of overseeing operations in Toronto. Okay, I'd love to welcome everyone to the stage.
All right. Everyone ready? Everyone's awake now, so that's good.
Test, test, test.
Test, yeah, we're good. Okay, well, let's jump right into it. The first question is for Mr. Woods, Steve Woods. You've been in KW for quite some time. You've observed sort of the natural change and the evolution of this ecosystem. I'd love to hear your thoughts of what you've seen change over the last, we'll call it 10 or so years, and why is KW on this sort of upward trajectory? Why now, and what's so exciting about it to you?
That's a lot of questions.
I know.
I moved here in 1989 originally, so I've seen a lot of change over the years. The last 10 years is probably, I came here 11 years ago, so it's about that. The easy answer is why here. The answer to that is the University of Waterloo. I think that's the answer to a lot of questions in town. Why now? I don't know, 10 years is a lot of now. How about right now? Right now, our competitors for tech talent are blowing their brains out with politics. In the United States, our great friends. I think that's tremendous for us. We're seeing senior movement into town in our world, and I think in other worlds, at a rate we've never seen before. A credit to all of the great entrepreneurs in town for creating these companies. And probably in our industry, talent has never been at a higher premium, which is hard to believe in our industry. And the University of Waterloo continues to produce amazing software engineers, software developers, and engineers of other times. So in a world that needs talent, we have a lot of it.
So you kind of keyed in on one thing, which is software engineering. And I think, if you go to the Bay and you spend a lot of time down there, one thing people always say is, the software engineering talent is first class here in Waterloo, which is great, and we agree. What about the rest of the talent? When you think about product, design, HR, marketing, sales, Dinah, you run a group here that's focused on R&D and effort. Can you talk a little bit about that and any thoughts that you have about other areas beyond just purely engineering, and how does Arctic Networks think about that?
You're not going to like my answer. All of our R&D is here in town because obviously Waterloo and so many other great schools nearby. And we had two founders, one in the Valley and one here. So R&D has been built here. Sales, marketing, everything else is built outside of here. So I don't really have a good answer for that from an Arctic Wolf perspective, but I was part of BlackBerry and D2L and other great companies in town. And I think, smart people come to places where interesting things are happening. So, some of our product talent is directly from here. Some of it's from all over the world in different places because they see what's happening, they want to be part of it, and they come to the place where that is. And what I'm finding also is that a lot of my new hires aren't young kids anymore. They're people like my age or in their early 30s, and they're starting families. And this is a community where you can work in high tech and live in a place that is more like a small town, that's more conducive to having a family. That's, you don't have to drive 2 hours just to take them to swim practices, which is what we do apparently. But, in the Valley, it's hard to get places. It's very expensive to live there. And even versus Toronto, very expensive to live there. It's getting more expensive here, but it's still cheaper, and it's like a small town feel. Like, how many of you know more than 5 people in this room right now? Right. Because it's a small community, and we band together.
Okay, and Joel, you've been a part of 2 companies now, I think 3 companies actually now that, yours is dead. 3 companies that have been headquartered in Waterloo, have built and scaled here, and that's BlackBerry, Kick, and now Skywatch. How do you think about it, this being home and this being the central hub?
Yeah, so certainly my experience, I'll never forget when I first kind of was interested in joining BlackBerry, one of my friends who worked there, another friend who was kind of observing says, he really feels like he's part of something. To be a BlackBerry, you're part of something. And to me, lots of people here have worked there. It leveled up the community. And so you're asking about, not just engineering, where, for me personally, I never would have had the opportunities if I wasn't at BlackBerry that I had. And I think that's the same from product and marketing and so forth. So that acceleration, I think, leveled up the region and set the stage for, even though there was the decline of BlackBerry, then all of these folks, all these talented engineers and product managers and marketers spread into the community, and I think that's really set the stage for where we are now. We've got great investment from big companies, we've got lots of startups, and I don't think that'd be possible if it wasn't for that rise and then fall of BlackBerry.
And we were just chatting before the panel started, and we were talking a bit about consumer product companies built in Waterloo. And you can make the argument, you can extend that really to Canada broadly. If you think about Kitchener-Waterloo, Toronto, Canada abroad, there aren't that many consumer-first companies here. I'm just curious as to why you think that's true, whereas we've had more success in B2B. Any thoughts on that, given that you have worked for one of the larger consumer companies in Canada?
Yeah, sure. Now, I have a theory. It's a hypothesis not based in any fact, just purely anecdotal evidence.
Pet theories is what they're called.
Yeah. So I think of the different strata of people that live in the region right now, at least by demographic, and we've got the student population. Obviously, we've got a very strong foundation at Waterloo in co-op programs. Those co-op programs send students to companies that they have to solve problems in. And then you've got, past that, you've got this kind of, I'd say we under-index on the new grads a little bit, and that may be because students have been here for 4 or 5 years and they want to go out and have an adventure in a bigger city. And then you've got your kind of early family age group, and then you've got, potentially researchers maybe with kids that have moved out. So my theory is that new grad level is the ones that really jumpstart a lot of the B2C stuff or the consumer-based applications. Kik is an example where where Ted is he was a university student just after when he founded the company, so that fits that thesis. But if you have been in the workforce for 5 years or 10 years, it seems like you would be exposed to more B2B problems, and then that would potentially invigorate that entrepreneurship at the B2B level instead of the B2C.
So then a question for the group is, do you believe that Kitchener-Waterloo should embrace this? And if that's what the DNA is of this ecosystem, should we lean into that? Or are there things that we can do to transform the ecosystem so that we can create net new, both B2B and consumer?
So yeah, I have an interesting theory around some of that stuff. So you pointed out that the new grads don't stay. And even I've noticed that to try and get a 3rd or 4th year co-op student from the University of Waterloo to stay at a KW company is near impossible. In fact, you probably can do it. Yeah. But if you're not Google, so we've almost given up on trying to get that. So I think, one, we could just accept that fate and say, fine, we won't have those kind of companies come out of here. Or we could start looking at schools outside of Waterloo. And that's what I've started to do. Because, Waterloo is amazing. There's always going to be producing amazing talent, but there's only so many positions there. There's only so many students that can go there. And, typically, and I went there, so I can criticize because I went there. But typically those students are all getting 97% and above in high school just to get into that computing program there. But what I find interesting is people who become entrepreneurs with crazy ideas are people who have failed before because they know how to get up again and try something else. So I think we actually get a lot, this is also anecdotal, but crazy ideas from people who got 80s in high school, and maybe they worked extra hard in university and got better marks there. This is me, I got 80s in high school. And I think we are doing a disservice to the region right now by focusing solely on the University of Waterloo. We've started recruiting from Guelph, Conestoga College. I'm going to go back to my alma mater in Alberta and start recruiting from there. Bringing in talent from other places where this is the cool community they just came to, not the it's too small for me, right? Yeah.
That's interesting. Actually, I hadn't really thought this much about this one particularly.
Well, technically, Google wouldn't have thought that for a very long time. Only
I guess
hired
I'm out of
waterless
touch.
students.
Yeah. Well, on a consumer basis, I really don't think there's any reason. I like diversity. What I was going to say until I listened to these great answers, this always happens on panels, right? You're like, oh, wait a minute, those are better ideas. But like, is that, I don't think of it that way myself, but I have a different problem. So I think about themes, like work themes, and they apply pretty well to consumer or business to business. For example, we've led much of Gmail for many years and may soon lead very much more of Gmail. And it's both a consumer and an enterprise product. More increasingly at Google, Gmail is seen as a core problem for delivering enterprise services more than a consumer problem, which is obviously very different. And but the themes around understanding user engagement, understanding how to deliver very reliable, very large-scale transactional services, they apply equally well. So, and I think that's also been true for us around things that taking advantage of, well, what makes sense for us to work on here? While there's a tremendous school that certainly has software, but it has an amazing amount of computer engineering talent and other kinds of engineering talent. And so we've really taken that to heart and tried very hard to work on themes of work across sensing, across integrating hardware into consumer services, and that's led to products like Google Wi-Fi, which we started here, and Chrome Pixel, which we started here, which we weren't able to execute at that scale because of the immense needs, but we're able to start here. So I really don't see a reason why we would not want to do more around consumer as well. I mean, I think we will get that opportunity right now. I really do. I think as we're, and back onto the talent and the movement, I mean, these are great comments. I'm doing similar things. Like, I'm very much looking to bring people in. Last year, we brought 50 people from outside of, well, actually 50 people from the United States and another 50 from outside the country into the region. And I think this is good for us because of the need to have diverse viewpoints and connections.
Thank you. And just a question to the group. So just by a quick show of hands here, is who's familiar with the concept of blitz scaling? Anyone? Alex, Marcelo? All right. The concept of blitz scaling is basically optimizing for an outcome, optimizing for speed over cost, right? So fairly popular in the Valley, very popular amongst consumer startups. It's very popular when someone believes that it's a winner-take-all market, right? And so the question I have for the panel is, do you think you can blitz scale in an ecosystem like Kitchener-Waterloo? Is this ecosystem better suited for more capital-efficient growth over time?
I think that's an interesting question. And from our experience, I think it's actually hard to do here because to blitz scale, you need a lot of money. And typically...
Google's got a lot of money.
Well, they do, yeah. Okay, Google doesn't count in all of these things. They're special. They won already. But it's hard to get a lot of money here, right? So let's look at the companies who did get a lot of money and are here. I bet you almost all of them went through Y Combinator. So they left here, went there, and came back. Bonfire is a good example. Yeah, exactly. And for us, we just got a big round, but again, our head office is based in the Valley, and our CEO is well connected with venture capitalists from previous connections. So I think it's hard to blitz scale because the money is not as readily or easily available here as it is in, say, the Valley. And I mean, we could work on that with Toronto a little bit more, I think, but that's one of the issues I would think.
I think something's changed. Those are all good comments. I think something's changed. And I think there's several things. One is the immigration potential for this region. Through the new Canadian approach to immigration visas, like there's some stats out there recently, I saw one this morning, like the number of people in India searching for jobs in Canada is like up 300%, you saw that one,
too.
And down in the United States 60% year over year, and you're like, whoa, that is something different. And I think the fact that these people who are very highly talented, I'm just picking a random thing I saw on TechCrunch probably this morning, but it's like, can come here means we could. And so then what's missing? The reason, right? Like in our case, like speaking, for local Google, like we would never do that. Or I would never do that. Let me rephrase that. I would never do that because it doesn't make sense here. for us. It wouldn't make sense in the community. It wouldn't make sense in the context of this company. It wouldn't make sense. So we do things at scale that make sense for us. Like, could I hire 300 or 400 people? Sure. But would we hire like 3,000 in a hurry? Of course not. But like, could we? Absolutely we could, because we could afford it. But I think a company with the brand that decides to set foot here and say, we are going to make it here, and do that on a worldwide basis and say, you should come here, not because of Waterloo, not because we can hire great talent, but because we're a great company. I think they can do it.
Yeah, and I'll just pile onto that. I think it's probably easier to convince someone from Brazil to move here than it is to convince someone from Toronto. So,
Totally agree with you.
so we're taking advantage. Sounds like we're all taking advantage of that. And the Canadian government with the global talent streams is the one that we're using is fantastic for that. So just more of the same.
We have a portfolio company that brought 100 engineers from Brazil to Winnipeg in February. Like that blew my mind. So it is certainly possible to convince people to move. Okay, and then attracting talent is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, of course, is retaining great talent. Can you describe some things? We'll start with you, Joel, but just things that you've done and you've observed in the past that have allowed you to retain some of your top talent at the companies you've been at.
Sure. Yeah. So it's certainly, I think life stage is another part of it. But for us, one of the things as a small company, we've got 22 people in our company and about half engineers, is that connection to the product, and they can see exactly what they're doing and the changes they're making. There's big companies in the region. There's Google. There's Shopify. They can pay better than us. They have better benefits than us. So we have to be very selective about the pieces of that we can make sure really are attractive to them. So it's hard to sort of generalize with everyone, but for us, we're being very selective about how our employees feel like they're contributing in a almost like a round table, and they can see their changes impact the product every day. Now, big companies, you can do that too. At BlackBerry, certainly you could, but in some cases it was a lot harder. But people may like the comfort and stability of some of those bigger companies for that too. So it'll be challenging as we grow and grow to keep that, but that's one of the things I think every company just has to figure out as they grow over that 50 number.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something just about connect with the product, and one of the things that we've seen in the past, and we encourage a lot of our portfolio companies to do, is ensure as part of the interview process, try to interview to see if they actually connect with the product. People sign up for missions. They don't sign up to work for the CEO. They don't sign up to work for their particular boss. They sign up because they want to build something big and they want to be part of a mission. So trying to interview for that in the earliest stages always seems to work and have a higher rate of retention.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that we've been doing at Arctic Wolf that have really kept our talent. So right now we have about 40 developers. The company is about 6 years old, and we've had 3 leave voluntarily over 6 years. And for us, I think why this is happening is open transparency always. So our devs know pretty much everything that's happening in the company, and that way they have an ownership in it as well. And 2, we have this concept of no walls. We don't have a test team. We don't have a DevOps team. We don't have, a whole bunch of separate teams. Every person in our dev part of our R&D world is a member of technical staff. If you build something, you test it, you secure it, you deploy it, you monitor it, you own it. And that gives a lot of power to a developer, and when they feel like they have that much ownership over what they build, how they build it, it really empowers them. They get really excited. The amazing thing about not having a test team is you've basically taken away any kind of safety net from the developer. So the first time they don't really test something very well and have to wake up at 2 a.m. to fix that issue, they realize they're not going to do that again. And then making sure you have career paths for people, making sure they know how they're contributing, how well they're contributing, really coaching people to become better and be the best that they can be in your environment, making sure they know that there's always another challenge. If they want to move around, they can move to that challenge. So the no walls, open and transparent, and then, oh shoot, the third thing was right there, and now it's gone. But, challenging work is it. There we go.
Those are good reasons to stay.
Yeah.
I've tried very hard to be the anti-Google. So
What does that mean?
it means that people who work here are loyal. We all know that. People who, they like to stay on their companies, they don't want to let people down, they want to have friends at work that they're friends outside of work. And I know that, I've been in the community a long time. I believe in that. That's how I like to work. And so I've created a very similar environment where I work on themes, I work on products that people can buy into, and if they don't like one, I'll give them another. And we're very active on career management, which is not something large companies can't do it. It's really hard, like to have someone who actually fundamentally cares that you have a chance to do something more powerful, more impactful. And if you walk into my office at Google and say, I have a better idea, then we're working on that, like we are immediately. And so, I mean, we can all do these things, and I have lots of advantages, but I have lots of disadvantages. And so I can't offer a really small, agile startup environment. Well, I sort of can, but it's not the same, is it? It's not your own thing. And so if someone tries to leave Google and say, hey, you know, who we really like, I encourage them very much to go to startup. Like, why would, no offense to the Squares and Shopifys of some of my friends in the audience here, but like, is like, no, don't do that, that's ridiculous, they're like us. Not quite as good as us, but they're like us. Instead, go here, right? Go do this. Go found Ritual, right? Go to this other startup. In fact, I've actually, you know, one of our people left to go Ritual, and if engineers really want to leave and try it, I tell them to go there because it's going to be a lot of hard work, and they'll probably come back.
All right. Do we have enough time for questions? Oh, okay, cool. So we want to open up the floor if there's anyone that want to ask any of our panelists any questions, but if not, I can keep going. But any volunteers or any questions for Steve, Dinah, or Joel? Oh.
Don't be shy.
Hi there. Just a quick question. What are your thoughts about how do we keep more people? I guess I know that Dinah specifically not too bullish about Waterloo grads, but one question I did have is, you know, we get co-ops early in some of the companies, and then they leave to the valley, and you see that talent leaving a lot, and you see all this great work done locally to bring them up to speed. So I was wondering if you guys had any recommendations or any ideas of what we should all do to keep more people here in Kitchener-Waterloo, Toronto, as opposed to them going to Silicon Valley.
Let me start. So I think we are way, way too nice. I always hate these things. Canadians are nice, Americans are not nice, and therefore we're awful business people. But at the end of the day, we are nice. Like, in Silicon Valley. Like, I was talking to Stephen Lake not too long ago. Like, we got to get out there and tell people, it is awful. I lived there for 12 years. Why don't we say it? It's good here. We have great schools, good working environment. We all like each other for the most part. And you know what? It is not like that there. It's not. And so, yeah, okay, go there and your kid, I went there. But like, you know what? It's not a good place to live. It's not a good place to raise your family. Nobody is loyal to you, and you don't need to be there. The venture money will come here. The ideas are here, and people are here. There.
Drop the mic. We don't need to answer, he just answered. Next question.
Anyone else?
So Canada, and Waterloo in particular, seems to have a reputation of doing really well at the early startup scene and founding, especially in Waterloo, a ton of small early stage companies, but very few of them seem to survive to reach that BlackBerry level growth, to international stage companies. We're seeing a couple of them happen, but it's hard to keep those companies that are going to have a lasting impact on the ecosystem. How do we make sure that we're encouraging companies that are built for the long term over companies that are built for acquisition?
So I think it's too early to say that, to be honest. If you look at BlackBerry, it was 20 years old before it hit 1 million BlackBerry users. Many people don't know that. So I started at BlackBerry in its 20th anniversary year. We've only seen this real explosion of companies in the last 10 to 15 years, especially with BlackBerry kind of imploding and all this amazing talent coming in the community and creating something new. I think it's way too early to tell. I don't actually see a lot of companies failing at the medium-sized growth right now. There's a lot of companies building. And I think that in another 5 to 10 years, we are going to see an explosion of companies hitting that $100 million a year mark that we're all looking for.
Yeah, so your question about building a company just to be acquired versus building one that's actually got a profitable business behind it. One of the things that BlackBerry was fortunate enough to be part of a group where when BlackBerry acquired companies, they tended to go sort of in one general area of R&D. Not all of them, but lots of them were there. So I was fortunate enough to get to work with a lot of folks who had successful exits. And so talking to all of them, I would always try and ask them in some kind of way, what would you do differently next time? And they almost universally, at least the top 3 things they would say is, I would have made a company that was self-sustaining because number 1, you extend your runway obviously, but number 2, you're actually more valuable for acquisition. So I think what you're seeing, and your question to me about B2B here, B2B investors want to see a good business plan. So I don't think there's very many B2B investors, and you can confirm or deny this, that are looking to invest in a company just for them to be acquired, unless there's a solid business plan for that company to be self-sustaining as well. So I think that's something the region has going for us as well, if we are over-indexing, in fact, on B2B.
One more question.
So I've been reading about ageism in the tech sector, especially in larger cities like San Francisco and New York City, where the idea is that entrepreneurs who don't fall into the millennial age category are finding it extremely difficult to get started. So I'm wondering if you think that's if that's a factor at all in this community, and if what we can do about it, if so.
I think the statistics don't bear that out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's a report that just came out not too long ago that actually said, and I can't remember the exact amount, but like the average age for a successful entrepreneur was, I think it was like mid-40s, is that right? For, like where the data plays out, right? And I think you end up seeing, and I've observed it a lot myself, is like, look, if you're in your 20s and you build something and there's an opportunity to sell it for $5 million, that's life-changing money when you're in your 20s. So I think the willingness to potentially sell out earlier is high. You have a higher likelihood to do that when you're younger. When you're older, this is kind of your shot. Right? This is sort of what this is your one swing, and I think people are willing to do that. There's also a certain maturity that comes with age and experience and know-how. There's a network that comes with it. So I think, I don't know, we don't look at it that way. I'd be interested to actually take a look at our own data just to see, but I think if I had to guess, most of the entrepreneurs probably I'd say like late 20s, early 30s is kind of where they are, but then we also funded a bunch of repeat entrepreneurs as well who are like late 30s, early 40s. All right, well, thank you. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you to our panelists, really appreciate it, and let's give them a round of applause.
We have a chat between 2 people, one from San Francisco and one from here. So Alex Taussig joined Lightspeed in 2016 as a partner focused predominantly on consumer technology. He led Lightspeed's investments in Daily Harvest and Zola, as well as several unannounced digital media businesses. He also has a really strong interest in aerospace and led Lightspeed's investment in Vector. Prior to joining Lightspeed, Alex spent nearly 7 years at venture capital firm Highland Capital Partners, first in Boston and then in Silicon Valley. Alex writes frequently about the intersection of tech, commerce, and culture in his weekly-ish newsletter, Drinking from the Fire Hose. Marcelo Cortes has been building software for over 20 years. He has led leadership roles building many successful products, including Google+, Google Hangouts, and Square Cash. Most recently, he co-founded Faire, where he leads engineering as CTO. Can you join me in welcoming them to the stage?
Uh-oh, hello. I get my own mic. This is pretty cool. By the way, just for the record, I hate that photo. It's like the worst photo has ever been taken of me. For some reason, they always use it as my headshot. But you know what? It is what it is. Hi, Marcelo.
Hey.
So yeah, thank you, Marianne, first of all, for putting together an incredible event. It's an incredible to see the community come out like this. This is my first time in Kitchener, and couldn't be more excited to be with all of you. It was nice to come out here on the eve of the midterm elections, because I guess I have an option in case things don't go my way tomorrow. I can just hang out, right?
You're always welcome.
That's how the immigration policy works now.
We accept everybody.
Oh, that's good. And it would be nicer to have that in our country too. Yeah, it's really exciting to be here. It was great to hear from Dinah, in particular, who we're investors in Arctic Wolf, and we love to invest all over the world, anywhere innovation is happening. About 80% of our consumer-facing investments are outside of the Bay Area, and that's something that's been true for us ever since we invested in Snap and the Honest Company in LA, and in Zola in New York, and Arctic Wolf here, and we have investments in companies in London and Chicago, all over the place. And we fundamentally believe that really innovation comes from great entrepreneurs that can build their companies anywhere now because the tools and resources are available. And so I'm particularly excited to talk about that in the context of what you guys are doing at Faire. So, and also just quickly, thank you to Ameet, who's been super supportive, and as well as our sponsor, RBC. So Marcelo is the co-founder and CTO of Faire. I think you heard a little bit about the company. It's the leading marketplace for wholesale in the United States. And in North America. If you haven't heard of the company, you probably will soon. They're doing very well, I'm told. In only a few years, they've grown from about 3 co-founders in Y Combinator in Silicon Valley to the team of now over 60 employees. And I'm told that we're dual headquartered.
Yes. We started with a company here, an office here, an office there. Media here likes to talk about San Francisco company with engineering running in KW. We talk about it as we have 2 main offices, one here, one there, and we are building both.
That's right.
Sides.
So Marcelo started Faire with friends and colleagues from Square, and he built and led the engineering office here in Kitchener for Square. He was a staff software engineer and was most actively involved in the payments app, the Cash app, and built it from a prototype in 2013 to a product that's been downloaded more than 30 million times and has millions of daily active users. Prior to Square, Marcelo was a senior software engineer at Google, where he worked on Hangouts, Google+, and a lot of other big projects. He spent about 2 decades writing code and graduated from Waterloo. So, this evening is all about scaling product and engineering orgs, and we've heard from some incredible technology leaders and how they've done so across various organizations. But your journey is really unique because you've spanned a bunch of different, types of companies along your career. First off, you spent your whole career in the region. Secondly, you worked at Google, which gives you the perspective of working at a massive technology company. Then you went to Square when it was kind of growth stage private company, and now you're starting your own. So you've seen the full life cycle, albeit in reverse order. So I want to...
for now.
Yeah, for now. And until Faire is bigger than Google. I want to start at the beginning, though. I want to ask how you made your way into the software business.
Yeah, so originally I'm from Brazil. I heard lots of Brazilians are coming to Canada. I was very young. I was about 12 or 13 when I first started using a computer. I was fortunate enough that my parents had a business and they got a computer for the business, and I started using it right away and fell in love with it. I spent a lot of time on it. I didn't know English. I was like typing commands on the computer and like learning English as I was using the computer. And then I was very fortunate also to be able to go to a high school, a special high school in Brazil where it was a high school and college together, so we studied from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., half of the day high school subjects, and the other half, it was like a college degree type of thing, where I got to program most of the day. And at that time, internet was starting, and I managed to get a modem, and I was like doing a long-distance phone call to connect to a BBS, where I was learning how to program in the evenings and spent a lot of time doing that. And in order to finish that school with a actual college degree, I needed to do an internship. So I found a job in a large-ish consulting company in São Paulo, where I started this is like 1998, and I was working with mobile devices, like the very first ones, like Windows CE and Palm OS. Most people here might not have even heard about it. And we were building software to actually automate Salesforce. It's kind of, there's a little bit of what Faire is doing there. These people that were, like the companies I was working for were like Coca-Cola or Unilever, AC Nielsen, very large companies, and they had people going around taking orders on paper to sell Coke to bars and restaurants. And we replaced it with this mobile device. They would go there, place an order, ask to use the phone line, do a dial-up connection, upload these orders to our servers. And it was great. Like I was in the that was, I think, the birth of mobile computing. And I got fortunate enough to do that, and I was 18. Right? And I got to Canada mostly because I thought it was like, it was cheaper to come here to learn English. My goal was to eventually go to Silicon Valley or to the US. I got here, I met my wife, I fell in love with the place, and since then I have been avoiding going to, moving to the Bay Area and enjoying this relationship with being there and being here at the same time, mostly here, which as Steve said, is it works out better.
Valley tech companies, Google being probably one of the top 3 largest web scale companies in the world, by definition doing things at scale all the time. When you were working there, what were some of the things you observed in the way Google functioned that enabled it to do things at that kind of scale?
Yeah, so there are 2 things that are very impressive about Google. The first one is how organized it is. The second one is the people. And it's not just software engineers. The people at Google everywhere across the company, they are excellent at their jobs. Like some examples is like you lose your badge, and there's a very well-defined process to request a new one. 20 minutes later, you have a new badge in your desk. Like you have an issue with your computer, you go to the IT department, and they know more than your computer than I did, which was the first time in my career that I saw it. They fix it right away. So the people...
It was your mic, not my mic.
Okay. That happens to me a lot. So combining, like, Google has this very well-oiled machine. Everything just... That's the only way that it can operate at that scale. I think it's working now. I'll keep going. So you combine this very well-oiled machine with that they have amazing process everywhere, with the quality of people that's all over the place, and that's the only way to operate at Google scale. Like, you apply that same level of excellence that they have, getting you a new badge, to DevOps, to SREs, to software development, to PMs, to design, and you get a company like Google. And I don't think they could do it without that combination.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like when you're at a company with that level of scale that's been around for that long, you have all these resources that you've built over the years that you get to amortize the productivity enhancements of those over every new employee that comes. But, it's always a function of prioritization. And when you go to a company like Square, which was, I don't know, how many employees was Square when you guys started there?
When I joined, it was about 300, I think.
About 300. So very well into its growth phase, but still 4 or 5 years from IPO. Is that?
Yeah, 5.5 years from IPO.
Yeah.
Or 4 years from IPO, sorry.
Yeah. So it was clearly working, but like in that kind of environment, you can't depend on all that stuff. There's not that much infrastructure. So how do you then solve problems as you're going through an incredibly fast ramp? Without being overly burdensome and sort of like prescriptive in how you do that.
Yeah, so Square was an interesting company to join at that phase because, yes, as you say, they were going through that growth. Jack Dorsey, of course, did a great job. It was his second company. He learned a lot, and like when I got there, the process at Square was very good. They were amazing at building products. The difference from a company like Google was that it's not like we could snap our fingers and servers would show up, database would show up for us, right? There was a lot more involvement into getting our own resource, managing them. There were more challenges as an engineer. It's a more broad role than building software purely. We had to take care of a lot of our own infrastructure. Square also, they did a lot, in the early days, they brought a lot of people from companies like Google, Facebook, and Apple as well. So they started building a lot of the tools and frameworks that a company like Google had available, but they obviously weren't there yet. Right? It was way more challenging to build our own.
What was the origin of the office here for Square? Like how did that kind of get started, get off the ground, and how did it work with the rest of the organization?
Yeah, that's interesting because Square hired an employee from Google, Jess Wilson, here, and he was working remotely. He joined Square because he was friends with the CTO from the early days that they worked together at Google. When I was doing another startup before that wasn't going well, or we didn't have a proper agreement on the future of the company, and when I saw that Jesse was working for Square, and I knew Square was this like rocket ship startup, I reached out to him and I was like, what are you doing there? How did you leave Google? You were there for 6 years. And he's like, you should come talk to me. Maybe if you join me, we can start an office for Square here. And I did interview with Square, and eventually they gave me an offer. And they were like, okay, so when are you moving to California? And I was like, that was not on my plans. And some back and forth later, they allowed me to stay here. So Jess and I were working out of our basements, mostly his basement, sometimes mine. Eventually, we got lucky enough that we managed to join this prototype that was happening in California for the Cash app, or the Square Cash. At the time, it didn't even have a name. It was like 3 or 4 people. And very soon, a couple of weeks later, we took over the core of engineering for the Cash app here. And it was me and Jesse, and we started adding more people. Alan Pauling, who is here somewhere, came not too long after. And we had... it just happened that we had this team of very senior engineers building this product that started to become a thing for Square out of our house. And eventually we had 5 or 6 people working out of our basements, and Square had no option. They then decided to start an office here, but there were no plans to do that up until that point. But then they saw it working, and it was very efficient to have this engineering team 100% focused on the same product here without interruptions, without like anything else happening around them, and the product grew and became eventually very successful. And I think Square is pretty happy with the option to have started that office here.
Yeah, it goes to show it's not always a strategic reason that these things get started at these big companies, but it sounds like once you guys had critical mass, you were able to get the resources you needed to grow it. And it also kind of sounds like in some ways the isolation from the Valley enabled you to have a really independent team that built really an independent, like it's different than the Square app. It is literally stands on its own. Do you think that like being separate from Silicon Valley had something to do with how successful the product was?
I think having that office here, we had the best of both worlds. We have access to like the DNA there. The thing is, like the companies in Silicon Valley, they have been doing this for longer than anybody else. That's what's happening there, right? You can't try to be the next Silicon Valley without going through all the experience that they did. So it's like built in the DNA there. You hire a person that has been there for 15, 20 years. They bring all that baggage. They know what works. They know what fails. They have seen this all happens. We have that by having a company there, the product being built there, the customers, and we bring that here. But here we have this amazing talent, and we can just execute nonstop with a very efficient team. And if you manage to get the communication right, which is challenging at some point, you have a great thing going.
So now you've brought all that over to Faire, and we haven't talked too much about what Faire does. So maybe just give a little bit of a flavor of the types of problems you guys are solving, both kind of business and technical, and what unique engineering challenges come up for you and that you're trying to manage through.
Yeah, so Faire, as was announced earlier, we connect makers of products to stores that are selling this product. So we are an e-commerce, a two-sided e-commerce platform that only sells wholesale to physical stores mostly, which, if you think about it, doesn't sound like there's a lot of engineering challenges, right? It's like, oh, you're building an e-commerce platform, there's tons of that. But when you start to get to massive scale, there's a bunch of different problems that show up. Like one of them, especially on our platform where we do very targeted recommendations, it's a very important piece of our business. We use a lot of AI and machine learning to, when a store comes in, show things that are really, really relevant and belong in their store. So for any user that visits our webpage, we have a lot of requests, and each one of these requests have a lot of custom data that use like machine learning built models to serve the data. And as an e-commerce platform, you need to do that really fast.
Yeah, it's like how many SKUs are on the site? Like it's like tens of thousands or something like that, right?
We have, yeah. So even though we are a B2B company, which usually means a lot, like it's not like Square Cash or Google Plus where we had millions. We needed to have millions of users. It's not that many, but we usually have. On the platform today, we have over 80,000 registered businesses, and they actually come to the website very often.
And so serving, like, if where I'm from, we have Valencia Street in San Francisco, a lot of great independent stores. There might be 100 SKUs in that store. Mm-hmm. That store needs to go shop from a list of maybe 80,000 times whatever, how many SKUs those guys have. So it's a huge matching problem, and solving that in a data-driven way is actually a lot more complicated than I think most people give credit for, because people are so used to showing up at a store and seeing the 100 things that are in that store. Is that right?
Exactly, and that's the thing. We're talking about long tail of retail in the US, which no single company has access to all of this data. We're the first one that's getting to own this type of data, and connecting everything becomes a huge challenge. We are starting to notice things that nobody has ever noticed before. For example, the chance that a store that's buying a product that's made in the same state return that product is much lower than average. And so that means that now we can't just be generic. If you come into our website and you're in San Francisco, we have to look at products around you and rank them a lot higher in our ranking algorithm because we know that it's going to work better for you and you're not going to return those products. So when you apply that type of thing to every little search that's happening on our website, it starts to become a very complex data problem.
Yeah, how do you, when you guys think through product, balance sort of the store's desire to sort of be the arbiter of what goes in their store with the fact that you probably have better data than they do at this point on what they should be selling in their store?
So this is interesting because our first idea for the product when we presented it to Y Combinator and to some early investors was that our idea was a store is going to come in, we're going to show them 5 products or they shop by makers, so 5 makers that they must buy from. And we started with that and they hated it. We were like, I don't want a computer telling me what to buy, right? We are the curators of our own store. So very, very quickly we learned, that's one of thousands of learnings in this past 2 years, that they want to be in charge of selecting products. So we do a much better job today we have to be way more broad, but we let customers search for anything they want in the platform. If they want candles or if they want cards or whatever, they can go and search for it. But we became very good at matching them to makers that really belong in their store, that match the style that they have, the price range, the location of the store, and many other things that we look at. But we let them select what they think belongs in the store and what doesn't.
Yeah, got it. So what lessons did you take over to Faire from Square and from Google? What did you throw out and decide you needed to build from scratch? Like, what did you say, we don't want to do it like this? And the second piece of that question is, how has that affected the culture that you've built on the engineering side?
Let's go one at a time. Well, obviously from Google, I try to take the excellence in engineering, like the whole, as I said earlier, like seeing that well-oiled machine working with this very high quality of engineers and people in general was amazing for me. It was the first time I saw that in, like, at the time, 15 years of engineering. I take that to heart. Like we have a very high bar. We want people to be just as good as Google wants people to be. From Square, we took a lot of their product development. They were very good at, even though being a startup during growth phase, they were very good. They had a very good process of building products and being very, very data-driven. It was a scary thing for me. When I left Square, I was like, we're going to start a company. How do we do that? Because at Square, I would start a new product, and I had so much stuff available to us. Like anything you could imagine was there. You just grab and plug it in. And the process of building a product had a lot of tools available for us to be very like data-centric and analytical. A/B testing frameworks, the whole data pipeline, and how the data was available to everybody, and how easily we could build reports. So we didn't know how to build a product without having those tools available. So what we did is very quickly, we put our own frameworks in place. We got the things that we liked at Square. We improved on them. The ones that we didn't like or we thought could be improved, we improved a lot. And today, that's how we build our product. We got these amazing people. We have this very lean process. Like we build features very quickly, but like with very high quality. And we have an amazing analytics to keep track of everything that's going on. There's nothing that we ship that's not A/B tested, and that we're not monitoring whether it's making or achieving the results that we wanted to achieve.
So the second piece is on culture. So every company grows up with a certain set of established rules that the founders, indoctrinate, and then as you grow in your team, now you're around 60, you're about half of Dunbar's number, so people probably still talk to one another in person, but at some point you start to lose grip on that. So, what is it that kind of makes the culture special, considering where you've come from?
We're 70 already.
70? That number's a week old, so I guess.
So there is two things that are very important for me on everybody that we hire. So having this very high engineering bar, and I'll speak more on the engineering side because that's what I'm closer with. We have this very high engineering bar and we care about computer science fundamentals, but I want more on top of that. I'm not just hiring people because they're very smart and they can program. I want them to be connected with the business. I care a lot that they understand what we're doing and what we're doing, which goes a little bit to what Dinah spoke earlier on giving people ownership and transparency. This is another thing we took from Square. From the early days, Square was a very, very transparent company. We had access to everything. Like all the data was available, all the numbers were available, and we do the same. So like we hire people that we have a very high bar on engineering, and they understand our mission. They care about what we're building, and they want to see that in the world, right? They see how, like on our marketplace, we have entrepreneurs on both sides of it, on the maker side and on the retailer side. We are helping them thrive. We are making them be more successful, and we want the same culture in our company. So it's like a culture where we have very high quality of engineering mixed with a good understanding of the business.
Yeah. So I want to ask one last question, then I'll open it up for Q&A. So I'm just going to assume that many in this audience, there's a few of you may be kind of just starting your careers in tech. Some of you may have many years of experience inside of a larger company. Some of you might be looking for something that's a little bit more early or growth-oriented. Marcelo, what advice would you give to someone looking to make a transition either from school into tech or from a larger company into a earlier stage company, and maybe related to this, how you thought about it when you were going through the transition?
Yeah, so if you're going from a larger company to a smaller company, first of all, Steve touched a little bit on this, it's not for everyone. It's a different word. Like, again, you go, and I use Google as an example, but you go from a larger company where you have all these things available for you, and you're very specialized on doing like engineering, to a smaller company where you actually do not have all these resources. You have to figure things out. Like you need to build a new product or a new service, you need a new database. You gotta go get one. Like, we don't have a team that's gonna offer you a database and maintain it for you. You have to go and figure that out. So it's a much more broad job. I recommend it to people if they are up for it, right? If you have that mindset that that's what you want to have ownership, you want to have broad access to all of these things and participate in everything, it's a place where, like smaller companies, you're going to learn a lot more, a lot faster, or at least have exposure to all of these things. And with that, it's easier for you to figure out what you're best at, what do you like to do. It's great to have a company like ours that have this very high growth, because I tell people, like, we are high, and you are going to have to wear 4 or 5 hats on day 0. Like, there's no way around it. If you're not comfortable with that, I'm sorry, you have to go somewhere else. But if you're up for that, it's great, because we are very flat today. We are going to have to become more of a pyramid at some time, and like, you get to pick the hat that you like the most, the one that you're more passionate about, which is great for us that you're working on what you're passionate, and it's great for you because you're going to be doing what you love the most.
It's an awesome answer. Well, I want to give you guys some time to ask questions to Marcelo. So do we have a mic, or do I need to give my mic? Yeah, I can put it on all day. That's okay. Here we go.
Thank you. Any questions?
Could you talk a bit more about the dual HQ approach that you guys decided on? What are the pros to it? What are the cons to it? And what do you do to mitigate the cons that you see to that approach?
Yeah, so again, it's dual HQ. I say dual HQ because really we made a very well-informed decision of starting the company with 2 offices, right? Day 0, we had an office here and an office there. And of course, the offices had different responsibilities, but that was how we would grow the company. A lot of our early investors, they were skeptical about it. They were like, we never saw it working. And we were like, well, you have, because we did it at Square. Like, Square Cash was a little startup inside of Square, and it worked very well. There are challenges. The challenges on day 0 for me, and I have spoken to a lot of people in the Bay Area about this, you have to have autonomy and leadership locally. You cannot have a remote office or a secondary office and try to dictate how they operate from the other office. You have to have local decision-making. That's mandatory. So if you solve that, then you have this team that can operate. They also, and I think even Steve would agree with this inside of Google, you need to own products. Like, you can't have a piece of it being built here and another piece there. Or you have to own at least a big chunk of something. Like, and have full autonomy on that. If you put those things together, the third thing that you have to get to work is communication. Like, we are investing a lot and spending a lot of money on like state-of-the-art communications between our team, because we talk all day long. Like, and it's like, again, inside of Google, it's the same. Sometimes you're in the same office with somebody, but it's a long walk. You are going to do like video conferencing, and you're going to call people, and we do that all day long. Like, it has to feel like those people, they're not here, but they are here. They are reachable. You can talk to them whenever you want. If you got all of those things, everything else just works amazingly. Having it from day 0 is even more important and better, because it gives you superpowers for the future. If you think about a big company that or a growth company that starts in the Bay Area or anywhere else, and at some point they need a secondary office, it breaks everything. Like, they're not ready to have that. They don't have the communications. They don't have the organization, the internal organization that you need to have that. They do not have the process. So starting that from day 0 and making it work gives you the superpower. Like, if we ever need an office in another place for whatever reason, like in Toronto or Vancouver or elsewhere in the States, we can just start it. Our process just keeps working. Like, it's there for us. The optionality is there for us. The cons is that takes a while for us to get people to meet face to face. It's very good to have this human relationship. So in our case, we solved that by making sure we travel very often. Like, we want to meet people face to face. Our product managers, designers that are not here, they come here very often. We go there. Like, we are in December taking the whole team from here to San Francisco to spend a week. We'll have some offsites. We'll have our holiday party there. solving that and making sure people they feel like they know each other well and they're friends takes us a long way.
Sure, I'm just curious about thoughts, challenges, experiences you've had as you've grown your team from a small handful of developers to a bigger team. What has that been like? How did the team, etc.?
So our engineering team is still not huge here. We have today about 17 people. We are trying to add at least another 6 until the end of the year. So it's not huge yet. But the biggest challenge is our founding team, we are very good at building products with a small team. Like when we worked at Square Cash, we built a very large product, and we were still a very small team, 30 or 40 people. We can make that work very well, but when you start scaling, when we started the company, we were 5 people working in one office, and the whole team is there. Or 2 offices, but it's 5 people all together working on the same things. Eventually, we are 15 people still working on the same things. Eventually, you are 30 people working on this product, and now you have to start structuring things differently. So now you can't have one team of 30 people. You have to start having multiple teams working on different things. So there is all this synchronism between the 2 teams that starts to break if you don't do it properly. The work streams starts to break. We start to see the challenge. We started seeing this challenge before it started to happen, so we started to prepare. Again, this is another advantage for us of having our connection in Silicon Valley. When this starts to happen, I call some of our investors and I'm like, I would like to meet with people that have done this before. So we meet with founders of companies like Airbnb or other companies that scaled pretty fast, and we learn from them. So we were like, what went wrong with you guys? What do you recommend me to do? And we got a lot of very insightful comments. Some apply to us, some don't, but we are exposed to that experience, and then we try to apply whatever we think is right here for us.
One more question, anyone brave enough? Oh.
So you told us a story about how your original idea, your customers didn't like. I'm sure you said there's 1,000 things you learned along the way. Could maybe share another story of something that you thought was going to go one way and it turned out that your intuition was wrong, or you changed your mind on something?
Did you guys hear the question? Yeah, so the question was, I shared one story of what our intuition was wrong when we thought we should just give people 5 products that really belong in their stores. He asked if I have any other stories like that to share. There were many micro similar things like that. Some of the things are very obvious. We have one very recently. I'll share one that we have been fighting with this week. My team might be laughing there in the back. This is a mistake. It was one of our largest mistakes so far. We wasted probably 2 or 3 weeks of our time in a way. We have been building this new feature for our makers where we allow them. Historically, our makers, when they ship a package, they give us a tracking number and the cost, and we use that for everything else to work. We started to build a feature where they ship. We give them all the shipping information. We print the shipping label. We track the shipment ourselves, and we try to enhance it too much. So we wanted to actually send FedEx to go and pick up this package for them automatically. So it was it was one of the first decisions that we weren't very data-driven, and we didn't do enough customer research before we built. We started implementing it. First of all, it was a nightmare because FedEx APIs didn't work as well as they promised, and bless you. We stopped it. We were like, okay, this is not moving forward well. Our intuition was wrong here, possibly. We did a bunch of customer interviews. We did a customer survey. We called a bunch of people. We looked through the data, and we realized that they already have a process for shipping. They don't care about us sending FedEx to go there and pick these things up, the packages up. It was an unnecessary complication that we added there that created a lot of headache for us, and it wasn't needed. We took that out of the way. The feature became much simpler, and it's just as useful for our customers.
It would appear that all the questions have been answered, or drinks are in order and will be turned back on. So I'm sure you're all excited about that. But I want to say thanks again to Marcelo for this illuminating conversation. It's been really great for me to learn from your experience, and hopefully some of you feel that way too. It's probably also worth mentioning that you are hiring. Okay, so tell your friends. Tell your engineering friends especially. And thanks again to our friends at Golden, RBC, specifically Ameet and Marianne, and the others that helped organize this event in this wonderful space. It's really terrific. And I will hopefully see you guys again sometime soon in Kitchener. Thanks.
Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Marcelo and Alex. I appreciate all of your patience as I experiment with being an AV technician. We started with 5 microphones. We now have 1. I wanted to give a special thanks to Marine, who joined us tonight to help me out. She's from Skywatch, and she joined us last minute, so I want to give her a round of applause, please. And again, thank you to RBC for making this possible. And we have until about 9 o'clock, so take some time, meet the people that you came here to meet.